We're thinking this morning about John chapter 10, verses 1 through 10, as was read this morning. And the story is almost funny if it wasn't so relatable. So Jesus has just finished telling this vivid story about a shepherd and a sheep pen and a gatekeeper and thieves who climb over the walls and sheep who know their shepherd's voice. It is a rich, layered image drawn from everyday world in first century Palestine. So Jesus tells this story, and then John writes, they did not understand what he was telling them. Not the Pharisees, not the crowd, not the disciples, nobody. They stood there with what I imagine were furrowed brows and sideways glances at each other, and they probably were like, are you following this? Because I'm really not, right? So Jesus explains, I am the gate. What? I want to suggest to you this morning that if we are being honest with ourselves, 2,000 years later, with seminaries and commentaries and a whole industry of biblical scholarships behind us, I'm not entirely sure that we really understand the story or the explanation. We have heard this passage preached probably dozens of times. We know the vocabulary. We've seen the paintings of Jesus as the Good Shepherd and the gate. But I really believe that we have misunderstood the strangest and most provocative thing that Jesus says in this section of Scripture. Not that he is the shepherd, but that he is the gate. And that's the claim I want to explore with you this morning. Now, to get anywhere with this, we have to go back to the physical reality that Jesus is describing in this story. Because Jesus is pulling from imagery that his listeners would have or should have recognized instantly. The way you or I might recognize the image of a silo or a tractor. A sheep pen in first century Palestine was not a fancy structure or anything like what we imagine today. It was a rough stone enclosure, walls maybe 4 to 6 feet high, built without mortar, the stones stacked on top of each other, and they were fitted together just happenstance here and there. And along the top of the walls, shepherds would weave in sharp thorn bushes, the ancient equivalent to barbed wire. And the walls and the thorns together, they created a reasonably secure perimeter against animal predators and thieves, bandits. But here's the thing. The sheep pen, it had no gate, at least not any physical gate, not a wooden or a steel gate that was attached to the rocks with hinges that would open and close. It had an opening, a gap in the wall, just large enough for the sheep to pass through single file. And as I said, it had no structural gate. Instead, the gate was the shepherd of those sheep. And at night, when the sheep were all counted and settled into the pen, the shepherd would literally lie down across that opening. His body became the gate. And if a wolf or a thief wanted access to those sheep, they had to go across, go through the shepherd. He was not metaphorically the gate. He was literally, physically, bodily, the line of defense between safety and destruction for the flock. And this was just normal practice in Palestine. It's even the case now. A researcher traveling in the Middle East in the early 20th century was shown a sheep pen like the one I just showed you by an Arab shepherd who was not a Christian and had not read the New Testament. And the scholar noticed that there was no gate on the pen's opening and asked the shepherd about it. And the shepherd replied without hesitation, "I am the gate." Because he lay across that threshold every single night. His presence was the barrier. His body was the protection. So when Jesus says, "I am the gate for the sheep," he is claiming the most physically present and personally costly form of protection imaginable. He is saying, I put myself between you and everything that wants to harm you. You come in and go out under my protection. My body is what stands between the flock and its destruction. Let me retell John 10 with Jesus inserted as the gate, not just described as the gate, so we can, hopefully better understand what he is claiming here. There is a place where the sheep sleep at night. The walls are stone and rough thorn, and the air smells like wool and dry grass. It is a simple place. It was never meant to be beautiful. It was only meant to be safe. The opening in the wall has no door, but it is guarded. Jesus is there. He has stretched himself across the threshold, his back against the stone, his eyes open in the dark. He is not a gate you can push or pull. He is not a gate you can unlock with a key. He is a gate that you unlock through a relationship. He is a gate who breathes, who watches, who knows the sound of every sleeping animal inside and every threat outside. I hope you feel the difference. The gate is not a theological concept. The gate is a person, present, bodily, awake in the dark, willing to take the hit if the wolf comes. He is there to keep the sheep safe and alive. The church has, for most of its history, taken this passage and used it primarily in one direction, as a statement of exclusivity. Jesus is the only gate. You must go through him. There is no other way into the pen. And, there's truth in that. John 14:6 is a real verse. Jesus does claim to be the way, the truth, and the life. Exclusive claims are embedded in the gospel, of course. But that is not what Jesus is saying here in this passage, we have made the gate image almost entirely about who gets in and who doesn't. We have used it as a kind of a theological border control, a determinant for what religious system is the right one. And in doing that, I think we have misunderstood the message of this passage, the message of what Jesus is saying here. Notice what the gate does in this passage. Yes, it keeps certain things out, thieves and bandits and predators. They cannot get in through the gate because he is the gate, and Jesus does not collaborate with destruction. But the gate, it also opens deliberately, repeatedly, to let the sheep go in and come back, let the sheep go out and come back in. The language in verse 9 is essential to our understanding here. They will come in and go out and find pasture. In and out. In and out. And, as Yvonne so beautifully said last week, the God of and. In and out. In and out. The gate is not a one-way turnstile into a holding pen for the sheep. Jesus is not describing a fence that keeps his people locked in or out. The gate is a threshold of a living rhythm for the sheep, who are, by the way, already sheep. Safety at night, freedom and nourishment in the day, and the ability to return to safety once again. The pen is not the only destination. The pasture is also a destination. The pen is just where the sheep are safe while they are sleeping, and then they go out again. This is a parable about the safety of the flock, not a vision for controlling who is part of the flock. The gate does not convert non-sheep into sheep. It just protects the flock from death or abuse. Now we have to go somewhere that may be a little bit uncomfortable for some. Jesus says in verse 8, "All who have come before me are thieves and robbers." And then in verse 10, the thief comes to kill and steal and destroy. We hear this and we think of the obvious villains, the Pharisees with whom Jesus was arguing with. We picture the people who are obviously the bad actors in this story, right? The scholar who studies Ezekiel will recognize this immediately. In Ezekiel 34, God tears into the shepherds of Israel with some of the most scorching language in the entire Old Testament. Remember, these are not pagans or foreign oppressors that God is talking with in Ezekiel. These are Israel's very own religious leaders. God says through Ezekiel, "You eat the curds, you clothe yourselves with the wool of those poor little sheep, you slaughter the choice animals, but you do not take care of the flock." They are feeding off the sheep rather than feeding and protecting them. They were using their position of shepherd as a vehicle for personal power and gain. And Jesus, in this passage, is standing in that same prophetic tradition when he speaks to the Pharisees in John chapter 10. Some scholars go as far as to suggest that Jesus is actually referring not only to the Pharisees, but also to messianic pretenders who came before, with, and will come after Jesus, the true Messiah. And we have seen this too. It has happened across the entire sweep of Christian history. And it's happening today. We are living in a moment where story after story is breaking about religious leaders who use their platforms, their authority, and their spiritual power to exploit the very people they were supposed to be taking care of. We have watched institutional churches cover up abuse rather than confronting it. We have watched celebrity pastors surround themselves with people whose only function is to ensure that the leader's comfort is protected and his reputation remains clean. We have seen people weaponize the language of spiritual authority to silence questions, isolate the vulnerable, and demand the loyalty that only belongs to God. We have even seen convincing messianic pretenders come our way. As Jesus said in Matthew 24, for false messiahs and false prophets will appear and perform signs and wonders to deceive, if possible, even the elect. These are the thieves and the bandits climbing over the wall in the dark. These are the people who bypass the gate and charge admission. They turn the threshold of grace into a toll booth. They decide who is in and who is out, not on the basis of the Good Shepherd's way, but on the basis of their own preferences, purses, politics, and power structures. And the sheep suffer for it. Many of them still carry deep wounds. This is why it matters so much that we understand what Jesus means when he says, I am the gate. And for me, it's not what I've always heard. It is not a statement about who is in and who is out. It is a promise of safety and an abundant life for all interested followers. There is one more layer here that I don't want to rush through, and I'm very excited about because it connects directly with Easter, which we have just walked through, and to what we believe about the resurrection. If the shepherd's body is the gate, if Jesus literally, physically places himself between the flock and destruction, then the cross is the ultimate expression of what it means for Jesus to be the gate. To put one's life at risk for those in one's care. When Jesus died on the cross as the gate, he was not simply paying for the sheep's sins. He was absorbing the full weight of everything seeking to destroy the sheep. The thief comes to steal, kill, and destroy the sheep. And it had to go through him. And he let it. He took it. He stood in the gap bodily and held the line, and it killed him. And then the resurrection. The gate that was attacked on Good Friday was reestablished on Easter Sunday. Not just reestablished in this realm, but reestablished in a way that death itself cannot control any longer. The gate held. The gate survived. The gate opened in a way for the sheep to enter the pasture of abundant life. When Jesus said, I am the gate, he was saying, I am here to keep you safe. You can trust me. I am not here to pin you up. I'm here to set you free. Amen.